My entire family stood there laughing. My father, my brother, even my mother who used to read me bedtime stories. They slammed the SUV doors shut and drove off tires spinning dust into my face. I was 19, fresh out of high school, standing alone in the middle of a highway in Sedona with no wallet, no phone, no way home. I thought it was a joke at first, a twisted rite of passage, but minutes turned into hours. And when I walked into a gas station to use the restroom and found my credit card declined and my cell service gone, the truth hit me like a truck. They'd cut me off completely. Not just financially, emotionally, strategically, publicly. I was no longer a cruise. I was nobody. They said they wanted to see if I could make it back. I never did. And I never planned to. But 16 years later, they found me. And by then, everything had changed. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how our stories connect people from all around the world. Your comments and thoughts bring this community to life, and we're so grateful to have you on this journey with us. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a cozy seat, maybe a cup of coffee or tea, and prepare yourself for a tale that will captivate your heart from beginning to end. Let's begin. My entire family stood there, laughing, my father, my brother, even my mother, who used to read me bedtime stories. They slammed the SUV doors shut and drove off tires spinning dust into my face. I was 19, fresh out of high school, standing alone on the side of a winding road in Sedona, with no wallet, no phone, and no way home. I thought it was a prank, a twisted, messed-up family joke. But after the third hour, the jokes ran out. When I walked into a gas station to call for help, I realized the phone plan was canceled. My credit card's frozen. They'd cut me off fully and mercilessly. I wasn't just stranded, I was erased. They said they wanted to test my resilience. Tate, my younger brother, smirked as they pulled away. Let's see if he can make it back. Those were his words. My father didn't even look back. That was the last gift they ever gave me. I didn't cry, not that night. I didn't scream or break down or beg. I walked. I walked for miles under a setting desert sun, past wide fields of dust and sandstone, past red cliffs and closed signs. I slept that first night behind a fast food place, using my hoodie as a blanket, listening to coyotes cry in the distance. Hunger clawed through me, but I refused to call it what it was, abandonment. I called it clarity. They'd shown me who they really were. On the third day, I traded my sneakers for a ride in a pickup heading toward Flagstaff. I scrubbed dishes at a diner for tips and pocket change. One night, a server gave me half a sandwich when no one was looking. Another night, I slept in a church stairwell. I stopped counting the days. I stopped thinking about going back. At some point, survival became its own kind of freedom. I didn't need their money. I needed my own name. The crew's name was more than just money. It was a brand, a machine. My father, Vincent Cruz, didn't build a family, he built an empire. Power was his love language. Control was his legacy. My brother Tate was his prized replica, clean-cut, calculating perfect teeth and perfect grades. By contrast, I was a loose thread in a tailored suit. I liked color. I sketched logos. I edited photos. I made playlists and read memoirs. They called me sensitive. I took it as a compliment. They took it as weakness. So they left me to rot in the middle of nowhere and called it character building. In the first few months, I learned the rules of the world without wealth. Smile if you want help. Lie if you want to be left alone. I changed my name twice, went by Cruz, then dropped it altogether. I shaved my head, then grew my hair back. In Santa Fe, I landed a gig mopping floors at an old theater that smelled like popcorn and mildew. The manager, Elena, let me sleep in the back if I didn't complain and kept the place spotless. I read the discarded scripts actors left behind. I studied them like blueprints, how to write tension, how to break a character, how to build one back. That's where I met Theo. Theo was the projectionist, a dropout genius with thick glasses and a voice like gravel. He noticed me sketching logos in the margin of a playbill during a slow night. "You got an eye," he said. "You ever think about branding?" I laughed. "I don't brand things, I survive them." He smirked. "Then brand that. We started small, borrowed a half-dead laptop and pirated some design software. He handled the audio, I handled the visuals. We called ourselves Patchwork Studio because that's what it was. Scraps stitched into something whole. Our first client was a taco truck that paid us in burritos and shout-outs on Instagram. It was more than food, it was momentum. One referral turned into 5, then 10. A boutique hotel asked for a logo refresh. I started to think maybe this could be something. Maybe I could be someone. Not Cruz the heir, not Aiden the dropout, just Aiden. But I was still scared of my name. I used a fake surname, Silva, an old family name from my grandmother's side. I didn't want the Cruz name to poison what I was building. Then came the podcast. Late one night, I recorded a rambling monologue about abandonment. I didn't use names, I didn't speak in anger, just honesty. If you're listening, I said you've survived something. Me too. Theo uploaded it as a test. It went viral. We had no social media strategy, no advertising, just rawness, and people clung to it like lifelines. DMs flooded in, anonymous stories of families who vanished, friends who betrayed, lovers who walked out. I read every single one. And then, in a cruel twist of irony, my old family's PR firm flagged the podcast as a potential brand risk to Cruz Global. Tate himself, now leading the communications team, ordered a takedown request. He had no idea it was me. He called my voice dangerously relatable. I stared at that report for a long time. Dangerously relatable. That night I bought the domain aidencruz.com. I didn't launch it yet, but I was done hiding. Still ghosts don't fade easily. One morning I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a copy of my graduation photo, the one from Sedona. On the back, in familiar handwriting, "You should have come back." No name. No explanation. Just that. I burned it, not out of rage, but finality. The version of me that stood waiting in the desert was gone. He didn't need closure. He needed distance. Theo moved east. He fell in love, started a nonprofit. I stayed west, built, quietly turned patchwork into something more. We rebranded as Glasshouse Studio, a firm for underdog brands. I hired 3 designers, then 5, then 10. I never mentioned my family, never dropped my last name. But my work began speaking louder than blood ever could. Sometimes I'd hear Cruz Global in the news, acquiring startups, sponsoring galas, Tate on magazine covers, my father at summits. I felt nothing. Until one day a tech company that had been on Cruz Global's pitch list approached us instead. "Your aesthetic," they said. "It speaks." We won the account. I didn't gloat. Didn't post about it. Just walked home that night and sat on my roof staring up at the stars again. Only this time I wasn't beneath them. I was among them. They left me with nothing. I built something better. And I never looked back. When you live without a last name, without a mailing address, you start counting time by the changes in your reflection. My face became a clock. New lines, new scars, new shadows beneath my eyes that no amount of rest could erase. Years passed, not in birthdays or holidays I stopped observing those, but in skill. In small wins. In the look of a client who didn't ask where I went to school, only whether I could fix their brand. I lived like a phantom, floating between cities: Phoenix, Santa Fe, Reno, Sacramento. Always far enough from home, but never so far that it wasn't whispering my name. I told myself I wasn't hiding, I was surviving. But deep down I knew I was afraid. Afraid that if I ever saw them again, I'd become that stranded boy again. Powerless. Ashamed. So I kept my head down and worked. I built brands for people who couldn't afford agencies. I made restaurants look like chains, boutiques feel like legacies. I was obsessed with perception because mine had been erased. I crafted identities for others, while still unsure of my own. Each logo I created was a silent message to the world I exist. There were days I didn't speak to anyone. Weeks where my phone stayed on silent. Months when I questioned if I had any real friends or just contacts. I had a few constants, though. A thrift store camera I bought in Albuquerque. A silver ring that reminded me of the man I never wanted to become. And a single email address tied to my fake name, Griff Monroe. Under Griff, I built a digital presence. I didn't show my face. I let the work speak. My designs were bold, precise, clean. No fluff, no chaos. The opposite of what my life had been. I built a small online community of freelancers trading insights and gigs. We were all ghosts in our own way, bonded by ambition and invisibility. 3 years in something changed. A startup founder named Harper reached out praising my clean aesthetic. Said she'd been looking for someone to build her luxury skincare brand from the ground up. It was the first time a client offered equity instead of just payment. I hesitated. Equity meant permanence. It meant commitment. But something about Harper reminded me of Theo Sharp fast-talking, always 2 steps ahead. So I said yes. I worked harder than ever. I mapped every shade of cream and blush like it was war paint. I flew to LA for the launch, watched Harper give interviews while I stayed behind the curtain. She offered to credit me publicly. I declined. I wasn't ready. I wasn't Griff. And I definitely wasn't Cruz. The brand blew up. 3 months in Harper was featured in a national magazine. My designs were everywhere. People were tagging the logo I created, calling it iconic. I felt proud, sure, but also empty. Because the success wasn't tied to me. It was tied to a mask, to someone who didn't exist. And that's when I started to feel it, the ceiling. No matter how much I succeeded, I was stuck. I couldn't grow without exposure. And I couldn't be exposed without the Cruz name catching up to me. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was strategy. My past was leverage, and I couldn't let anyone use it before I did. I began journaling again. Not like when I was a teenager, but as a form of planning. I started mapping my real name's comeback, branding not just for clients, but for myself. Not ego clarity. I needed to own my story before someone else did. That's when I heard from Theo again. He had tracked me down through a mutual contact. We hadn't spoken in almost 5 years. He was doing well, had a partner, a little girl, a studio in Portland. He said he thought of me often. "You ever use your real name yet?" he asked. "Not once." "You should. You've built something real, man. Don't let fear keep you in the shadows." His words lingered. But fear wasn't the only thing keeping me back. It was anger, too. A rage I'd buried so deep it felt like part of my foundation. And if I stepped back into the light, what would I do with it? The answer came in the form of a conference invitation. A major tech summit in Miami was looking for branding experts to speak about digital identity. My name, Griff Monroe, was on the short list. I didn't even know how they got it, but they offered an all-expenses-paid trip and a keynote slot. I almost declined, public speaking under a false name, dangerous. But something in me said, it's time. I went. I wore a navy suit and a neutral face. I talked about trust and clarity, about building brands that make people feel seen. The applause was thunderous. People lined up to shake my hand. One woman told me my words gave her the courage to start her business. That night in the hotel bathroom, I looked at myself in the mirror, longer than I had in years. "You're not a ghost," I whispered. And the next morning I did something I never imagined. I introduced myself to the press, not as Griff Monroe, but as Elias Cruz. It was like pressing publish on a story I'd been writing in silence. In the weeks that followed, old classmates started reaching out. Journalists sniffed around, wanting to know where I'd been. I told them the truth, but only what I wanted them to know. That I had walked away from my family to find out who I really was. That I had no regrets. But one message changed everything. It came from Tate. Subject line: 16 years. Body. We saw the interview. You've come far. Can we talk? That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a request for access. I didn't reply. Not yet. But the world I had carefully built was shifting, and I needed to decide what came next, because I was no longer invisible, and they were no longer untouchable. Tate's message sat in my inbox for 4 days before I even hovered my mouse over it again. The subject line: 16 years was like a phantom limb. No matter how far I'd run, some part of me still itched where they'd amputated me from their lives. I didn't open it right away. I couldn't. It's wild how memory works. The last time I saw Tate, he had his hand on the back of my neck, pushing me toward the van, laughing with the others as they peeled out of that motel parking lot. Let's see if he can make it back. The words still lived under my skin, as fresh as if I'd just heard them. Now he wanted to talk. I didn't respond. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. I tried to throw myself into work. There were 3 pitches that week, one major rebrand for a national retailer, and a new mentoring initiative I'd signed onto for underrepresented youth in design. I showed up, shook hands, smiled on cue, but inside I was vibrating. By Friday, I cracked. I opened the email. Elias, we saw your interview. You've come far. I'm not sure what I expected, but seeing you on that stage, it hit me. Can we talk, Tate? There was no apology. No, we were wrong. Just a vague acknowledgement. And yet, my heart raced reading it. Because whether I liked it or not, something inside me still wanted to be seen by them. Not as the screw-up they left behind, but as the man I had become. Elias Cruz. Not the broken teenager they abandoned in another state. I typed a response. Tate. You want to talk? Start by telling me why. Why now? Why after 16 years? Why me? I didn't hit send. I deleted the draft and shut the laptop. The pain even now was sharp. But I wasn't that boy anymore. I had learned to sit with discomfort. So I sat. I went to the beach that weekend alone, just me and my thoughts. Watched the tide roll in and out like it owed me something. By Monday, I was ready. I replied with a single line: I'll give you 15 minutes, in person. Miami only, my terms. He answered within the hour, done. The cafe I chose was intentionally public. Light-filled high ceilings somewhere I could leave without a scene. I got there early, ordered a black coffee, and positioned myself at a table with full visibility of the entrance. Control. I needed control. Tate walked in at 10:02. He looked older, lines deeper hair, thinner, but still recognizable. His eyes scanned the room, landed on me, and widened. He approached like someone crossing a minefield. Elias, he said, voice softer than I remembered. I didn't stand. "You've got 15 minutes. He sat. No small talk. No smile. Just sat and stared at me like I was a ghost he wasn't sure how to speak to. "I didn't think you'd actually show," he finally said. "Then why send the message?" Because I needed to say something. Anything." I leaned back. "Then say it." He looked down. "That night, what we did to you. There's no excuse. I've thought about it every day since." "I doubt that." "I swear," he said quickly. "I think we thought it was a prank at first. Some cruel, stupid joke. But when we left, when we kept driving, it stopped being a joke. And we didn't stop. And I don't know why." "That's a lie," I said coldly. "You do know why. You didn't think I mattered enough." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "You're right." I didn't let him speak again for a moment. I let silence stretch between us until it became unbearable. He swallowed hard. "Mom's not doing well. Heart issues. Dad's gone heart attack 2 years ago." I raised an eyebrow. "And this is supposed to matter to me?" He hesitated. "No. I mean, maybe. I don't know. What do you want, Tate?" He exhaled. "To undo it. To reconnect. To make it right. You can't." He looked up, eyes glassy. "But maybe I can do something better than nothing." I studied him. The old me would have jumped at this, at the chance for closure, for a door back in. But the new me, the real me. "I don't want back in," I said. "You don't get to have me in your life just because you finally feel bad. I built a life without you. I survived you." He nodded slowly. "I see that now." "I didn't come here for apologies, Tate. I came to see if you were capable of one." He looked like he wanted to say more, but I stood up. "Time's up." He reached into his jacket. "Wait, one thing. Please." I froze. He pulled out a small box. Wood. Mahogany. Familiar. I stared. "Is that—" "Dad kept it in the garage. I found it after he passed. I thought you should have it." I opened it. Inside, a rusted compass. Mine. The one I'd gotten from Grandpa Joe when I was 12. I'd carried it everywhere until the day they left me behind. I felt the air rush out of me. "This doesn't change anything," I whispered. "I know. But thank you." He didn't follow me as I left. Back in my apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed, the box on my lap. I opened it again, ran my thumb over the engraved lid, for the one who finds his own way. 16 years later, it felt like I finally had. That night I called Theo. "You saw him?" he asked. "Yeah. How do you feel, lighter?" "Not healed. But lighter. You know you don't owe them anything, right? I know. But maybe I owe myself the right to feel everything." Theo was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You're not just surviving anymore, Elias. You're living." I smiled. Not because it was over, but because it was mine. 2 weeks passed before anything else happened. I buried myself in a new campaign launch for a luxury hotel group in Manhattan. We were developing immersive branding that involved augmented reality experiences in the lobby and scent-based brand cues. It was the most high-profile work I'd ever done under my real name. Then the message came. This time from a journalist. "Hi, Elias. I'm writing a long-form piece on legacy estrangement and redemption. I heard your name from a contact who saw you at the Miami summit. I want to tell your story. Would you be willing to talk?" I almost said no, but something stopped me. Legacy. Estrangement. Redemption. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about the kid I used to be, the man I had become, and the invisible thread in between. I said, yes. The interview was raw. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told her about the prank, the abandonment, the years spent rebuilding. I didn't name names, but I made it clear family isn't always where you come from. Sometimes it's what you create along the way. When the piece ran, it went viral. Not tabloid viral, movement viral. People messaged me from around the country. Some said they cried. Others said they were inspired. A few shared their own stories of being cast out, laughed at, left behind. I realized then that I wasn't just healing, I was leading. My pain wasn't just mine. It was a beacon. One message stood out. Thank you. I've been hiding for 10 years. You just gave me permission to stop. I sat in the quiet after reading it. Just sat. And let it wash over me. This was my invitation. Not Tate's. Not theirs. Mine. I didn't think I'd ever see Cruise Global again, not in person. It was the one building I'd refused to fly over, the one company I refused to speak of by name for over a decade. But there it was, tall, silver, pristine, and soulless, just blocks from where I now stood, ready to walk into a different kind of war zone. The journalist's piece had gained momentum. It had sparked conversations, podcast invitations, think pieces, invitations to speak at conferences, panel discussions. The irony wasn't lost on me. My silence had been exile, but my voice had become currency. And now it had brought me face to face with the very empire that once decided I was disposable. An invitation had arrived, not from Tate this time, but from the board of Cruise Global itself. Not just any board meeting, a strategic retreat. They wanted a brand repositioning, and apparently the ghost they abandoned had become the man with the map. It wasn't personal, they said. It was business. I laughed for 10 minutes when I read that line. But I didn't say no. Why? Because this was no longer about closure. It was about reclaiming territory. On my terms. I walked into the retreat, flanked by two of my team leads from Glasshouse Studio Nico, my strategist, and Val, who led creative operations. Both brilliant, both loyal. Neither of them fully knew the history, but they'd sensed the shift in my demeanor the moment the invite came. This one matters, I had told them, and they didn't ask why. They just showed up ready. The meeting was at a private resort in the Florida Keys, exclusive enough to ensure no press, luxurious enough to remind everyone why the cruise name still held weight in certain circles. The moment we entered the glass atrium, my pulse spiked. It was also them, the expensive silence, the curated civility, the power dressed in linen and Rolexes. I could practically feel my 17-year-old self shrinking in my chest. But I didn't flinch. I walked in like I belonged. Because I did. Tate was there, of course. So was Uncle Simon, Aunt Beatrice, two board members I vaguely remembered from years ago, and one I didn't recognize at all. They all turned as I entered. Mr. Cruz, one of them said. Not Elias, not nephew, just Mr. Cruz. Cold, corporate, controlled, perfect. Let's get started, I replied. For the first 30 minutes, it was all slides and metrics, how Cruise Global's legacy branding had grown stale, how it lacked cultural relevance in 2025, how consumer trust had shifted to companies with visible social ethics. I let Nico run the numbers. Val showcased our reimagination of luxury through inclusion storytelling and design rooted in authenticity. They listened. They took notes. But the temperature in the room changed when I stood to speak. Because they knew. They all knew. This is not just about design, I said, walking slowly to the front of the room. It's about perception, reputation, identity. You don't need a new logo. You need a reckoning. Murmurs. I let the silence sit before continuing. You built this empire on exclusivity, on silence, on erasure. But we live in an era where truth is a brand asset, not a liability. If you want Cruise Global to matter in the next decade, you don't just need to rebrand. You need to repent. Gasps. One board member coughed awkwardly. Simon's face reddened. Beatrice folded her arms. And Tate just looked at me. Eyes wide. No denial. Just a man facing the mirror he'd avoided for 16 years. I dropped the final slide. It read in bold white letters, "Transparency is the new power." After the presentation, they broke for lunch. Tate approached me by the catering table holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. "You made an impact," he said quietly. "I made a point." He handed me 1 glass. I didn't take it. "I'm not here to be celebrated," I said. "I'm here to remind you that I exist, that I thrived without you, that your empire is no longer the center of mine." He set the glass down. "You're right. Then say it out loud. Say you left me." He looked around, lowered his voice. "Here. Say it." "I left you," he whispered, jaw tight. "We left you. We failed you." "No," I said. "You didn't fail me. You freed me." And then I walked away. The retreat lasted 2 days. By the second, a vote had been taken. The board unanimously approved our proposal. Glasshouse Studio would lead the full rebranding initiative, messaging design partnerships, public narrative. And the point person assigned from Cruise Global to liaise with us, Tate. Of course. I didn't resist. I didn't protest. If anything, I leaned in. Let him sit in the discomfort. Let him see every single day what it meant to work with the man they tried to erase. This was no longer about pain. It was about power. Back in Miami, Theo and I had dinner the night I returned. I told him everything what I said in the presentation, how they reacted the board's approval. He smiled between bites of pasta. "I always knew you'd get here." I shook my head. I didn't. Not for a long time. And now I looked out at the skyline. Now I know I'm not here to get back at them. I'm here because this is where I'm meant to be. You think they're sorry I don't care? That was the truth. Their remorse or lack of it no longer defined me. What defined me was everything I had built after they left. But just when I thought the past had released its grip, another message came. This time from someone I hadn't seen since the day they drove away. My mother. The email was short, Elias. "I heard you spoke at the retreat. I wanted to be there, but I wasn't invited. I don't deserve your time, but if you ever want to talk, I'm still here. Love, Mom." My hands trembled, reading it. Because hers was the betrayal that hurt the most. She hadn't just watched. She'd participated. And for years, she stayed silent. I didn't reply. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. That night I dreamt of her. Not the woman she became, but the mother I remembered as a child. The one who kissed my forehead during thunderstorms. Who taught me to whistle. Who used to hum when folding laundry. I woke up with tears on my cheeks. I knew then what had to happen next. I had to face her. Not for her. For me. The following week, I boarded a private train to Charleston, where she now lived with her sister. I didn't tell anyone. Not Theo, not my team. Just me, the rails, and the resolve I had earned inch by inch over 16 years. When I arrived, she was waiting on the porch. Gray-haired now, slower, but unmistakable. She stood. I walked up the path. Neither of us said a word. When I reached the steps, she opened her mouth. "Elias," And then she cried, shaking ugly, desperate sobs. I didn't move. I didn't touch her. I just let her cry. And when she looked up, eyes swollen, she whispered, "I never forgave myself." I nodded slowly. Good. We sat in silence for an hour. She told me stories, how she kept tabs on me from afar, how she watched every interview, read every article, how every holiday she set a plate she never touched. I didn't cry, but I listened. And when I stood to leave, she reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I didn't come for you," I replied. "I came to prove to myself I could." She nodded quietly. And as I walked away, I felt a weight lift, not because she was forgiven, but because I was free. When I returned to Miami, the air felt different, lighter, sharper. Like something had been cut clean, Glasshouse was thriving. Our campaign with Cruise Global was breaking benchmarks. I'd just been invited to keynote a national conference on ethical branding, and Theo had something he wanted to ask me. Over dinner, he pulled out a small box. Not a ring. A key. To his apartment. "Move in," he said. I smiled, because this wasn't a fairy tale. This was earned peace. And I was finally ready to open the door. The sun filtered through the high windows of Glasshouse Studios' Miami headquarters, casting sharp lines across the boardroom table. It was a Monday, but not just any Monday. It was the final day of Cruise Global's rebranding presentation. We were launching the internal reveal to their executive team before the public campaign rollout, and I was leading the session. Theo had made fresh espresso that morning, kissed me on the forehead, and said, "Today you bury the past." I didn't tell him this wasn't about burial. It was about resurrection on my terms. Tate arrived first, wearing a tailored navy suit and a facial expression somewhere between apprehension and performance. He greeted my team with formal charm, shaking hands like a politician. But when his eyes met mine, they softened. "I heard about Charleston," he said quietly. "I didn't go for reconciliation," I replied. "I went for truth. And did you find it? I found peace." He nodded, uncertain whether to continue. Before he could, the others entered: Uncle Simon, Aunt Beatrice, 3 executives, and finally Marisol Landry, the new PR lead Cruise Global had poached from a major European conglomerate. She'd been pushing hard to modernize the company's culture, and ironically, she'd become one of my strongest allies in this project. "Let's begin," I said. The presentation was immersive multi-screen projections, cinematic voiceover, a complete redefinition of Cruise Global's brand identity, not through a new logo, but through the narrative of transformation. From exclusivity to transparency, from legacy to evolution. We showed images of people, not products, stories of impact, of community, of acknowledgement. And then, as the final frame faded, I stepped to the front. "I stand here today not as someone who returned for revenge," I said, voice clear and unwavering, "but as someone who turned abandonment into agency." They listened, most of them too stunned to react. This isn't about forgiveness. It's about accountability. You don't get to rewrite history, but you can choose what comes next. The room was quiet. Simon leaned forward, hands clasped his jaw tight. Beatrice looked away. Marisol finally spoke. "This is what modern leadership looks like." I nodded, but I wasn't done. Later that afternoon, I met Tate in the side lounge away from the team. "Why now?" I asked. He blinked. "Why what? Why reach out? Why involve me at all after everything?" He didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was low. "Because everything I built started cracking. and I realized I didn't even know who I was outside of our name. I studied him. "And what did you find? That you were right to walk away, and I was wrong to let you go." I waited. "You deserved better," he said. I was weak. I followed them. I convinced myself it was about structure, responsibility, but it was about control and fear. It was the closest he'd ever come to an apology. I didn't need more. "Then here's your chance to do better," I said. "Not for me, for the next kid you'd leave behind." But closure didn't come from corporate deals or carefully spoken half-apologies. It came the following week in the form of an anonymous email sent to our office. Subject line, "I know what they did." The message was short. They didn't just abandon you. They planned it. Financial records exist. "Want them attached" was a redacted ledger file and a burner contact address. I didn't hesitate. I looped in Nico and Val. They traced the source. It was real. The Cruz family's CFO had been covering for years. The test that left me stranded. It was the final step in a strategy to remove me from the trust, entirely masked as an independence challenge to legally cut me out of inheritance. All of it had been orchestrated. Every laugh, every look away, every mile they drove off without me. Planned. I sat in my office that night staring at the ceiling. I should have felt rage. But all I felt was clarity. I printed every document, every statement, every board memo. I highlighted, annotated, created timelines. I built a narrative not of emotion but of evidence, and I sent one copy to a journalist I trusted. Then I scheduled a private meeting with Simon and Beatrice, just the three of us. No assistants, no lawyers. They arrived tense. Simon wore his usual poker face. Beatrice wore pearls, always trying to pretend nothing could touch her. I placed the folder on the table. "You recognize this?" Neither answered. "Because if you don't, the press will help you remember." Simon's lips thinned. "What do you want, Elias?" "Not money," I said. "Not revenge." Beatrice scoffed. "I want the truth to live where your lies used to." I stood. "Here's the choice. You issue a public statement acknowledging the trust manipulation and the intentional estrangement. Or I will." "You wouldn't dare," I cut her off. "You built Cruz Global on the illusion of honor. I don't need to destroy you. The truth will." Simon sat still, but his shoulders sagged just slightly. It was the first time I'd seen fear in him. They complied. 2 weeks later, a carefully worded statement was released. After internal reflection, members of the Cruz family have acknowledged past decisions that contributed to the unjust estrangement of Elias Cruz, now CEO, of Glasshouse Studio. They didn't mention the trust. They didn't mention the orchestration. But the language was enough. The world noticed. And so did the clients. Our studio exploded with opportunity brands who wanted truth, not polish. Leaders who'd been through fire and saw in us a mirror. We weren't a design agency anymore. We were a cultural force. But something else shifted too. One evening, Theo and I sat on the rooftop of our building, wine glasses in hand, city lights below. "You okay?" he asked. "I think I am," I said, surprised at the realization. He leaned into me. "You're not carrying them anymore, you know." "I know." He took my hand. "So what comes next?" I thought about it. Legacy. Not the kind built on inheritance. The kind built on impact. On building ladders for those still in ditches. The next week, I announced the Cruz Initiative, a multi-million-dollar fellowship for young adults who had aged out of foster care or experienced family estrangement. Not charity, not pity, a platform, a studio, a future. Applications poured in, and for the first time I didn't just feel successful, I felt whole. Because what they tried to bury, I turned into a seed, and it bloomed into something stronger than any empire they tried to keep me from. I stood at the threshold of the old Miami estate, the one my grandfather built in the 1970s, and that Simon had kept pristine like a museum of pride and isolation. The invitation had arrived the week before, formal embossed, signed in that familiar cold ink. Simon Cruz requests your attendance to the Cruz Foundation Legacy Gala. I didn't plan to go at first, but something in me, it wasn't pride and it wasn't revenge, told me I had to walk through that door. Not to be accepted, not to be acknowledged, but to be seen on my own terms. Theo was tying his cufflinks when I finally made up my mind. "You're going—" "I'm not going for them," I said. "I'm going for the kid they left on that highway." He looked at me in the mirror. "Then walk in like it's your house." I did. The Cruz Foundation Legacy Gala was opulence incarnate. White marble floors polished to mirror perfection, floor-to-ceiling glass walls revealing manicured gardens lit with soft golden light. Waiters in black gloves. A quartet playing muted strings in the corner. It was like stepping into a world preserved in amber. Simon stood at the far end, greeting guests like a monarch receiving tribute. Beatrice hovered behind him, her signature diamond brooch catching the chandelier's sparkle. Tate was nowhere in sight. I took a slow breath and entered. Heads turned, conversations faltered. I wasn't in the room, I was owning it. Not because of my suit, not because of the media stories, but because I no longer needed validation from anyone inside. I found Marisol near the terrace bar, laughing lightly with a few donors. "Elias," she said, leaning in with genuine warmth, "didn't think I'd see you here." "Didn't think I'd come," I replied. She handed me a drink. "Then I'm glad you did. Because whether they admit it or not, they're here for you." The main program began with the usual platitudes, honoring past achievements, announcing new philanthropic partnerships, celebrating Cruz values. I could feel my jaw tightening. These weren't values. They were facades. And then came Simon's speech. He took the stage with gravitas as always, thanking guests for their support through the years. And then he paused. "I want to acknowledge something. Someone." He didn't look at me directly, but the air shifted. Sometimes in preserving legacy, we forget to make space for growth, for change, and for those we once pushed away. A murmur moved through the crowd. "We are reimagining what Cruz Foundation stands for," he continued, "and that includes re-establishing bridges that never should have been burned." It was vague, sanitized, but it was public. And in his language, that was as close to an apology as anyone had ever gotten. I sipped my drink, not moved, not bitter, just resolute. Later that evening, I found Tate standing outside on the back balcony, hands resting on the railing, eyes lost in the manicured trees beyond. "I told them to say more," he said without turning. "I'm not surprised they didn't." He finally looked at me. "You didn't come for the speech, did you?" "No," I said. "I came to reclaim the space." He gave a small smile. "Then you've done it." Silence stretched between us. Comfortable, sad. "There's a part of me that still misses who we could have been," he said. I nodded. "Me too. But that version of us," he added, "couldn't have built what you did, what you are now." We stood there like that for a moment longer, no anger, no longing, just acceptance. In the weeks that followed, the Cruz name became more entangled with mine than ever. Not through legal contracts, not through board positions, but through public perception, through meaning. People no longer saw me as the estranged heir. They saw me as the man who made legacy answer for itself. Journalists called it a revolution in reputation architecture. Young professionals called it a blueprint for self-determination. Estranged sons and daughters wrote to me in long, aching paragraphs, telling me their own stories of being cast out, overlooked, disbelieved. I read every single one. And when the first Cruise Initiative Fellows arrived at Glasshouse's downtown incubator space, a former gallery converted into a hybrid creative lab and mentorship center, I greeted them not as a CEO, but as a survivor. Whatever they told you, I said during orientation, they were wrong. One fellow, Malik, was only 19. He'd been sleeping in his car after his foster placement fell through, but in our studio he found a desk, a mentor, a purpose. He was learning environmental design and had a natural talent for intuitive flow. I caught him one night rearranging layouts for a community garden project on his own time. "You really believe in this?" I asked. He looked up, shy but steady. "I believe it's my shot." I saw myself in him, not just the hunger, but the dignity. That was the difference between pity and empowerment. I didn't want to give these kids charity. I wanted to give them tools. One afternoon, weeks later, a letter arrived at my office. Handwritten, no return address, but I recognized the script. "My dearest Elias, I was wrong. We all were. I cannot undo what was done. But I want you to know I've seen you now. Not just the empire you built, but the soul you protected while they tried to erase you. I'm sorry. Mom." It was the first direct apology I'd ever received from her. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not because I needed to keep it safe, but because I didn't need it at all to move forward. Theo and I spent our evenings on the rooftop more often now. He'd published his second book, a memoir on resilience through displacement. We hosted quiet dinners, met with donors, traveled for speaking engagements. But none of it felt performative. None of it felt like we were trying to prove anything, because the noise had finally faded. One night, under the Miami stars, he asked, "Would you ever take their name back?" Fully, I shook my head. I never left it. I just changed what it meant. He smiled. "You're not rebuilding a legacy," he said. "You're writing one." And he was right. Because legacy isn't marble estates or family emblems or engraved watches handed off at galas. It's impact, it's refusal, it's reclamation. And mine was no longer tethered to their history. It was rooted in my truth. I didn't attend Simon Cruise's funeral. Not out of spite, not even out of indifference. I simply didn't feel the need to say goodbye to a man who had in many ways already made his peace the moment he gave that half-apology at the gala. His passing was quiet heart failure in his sleep. The news made headlines for a day, accompanied by photos of his real estate empire, the Cruise Foundation milestones, the typical praise of a visionary leader. What they didn't mention was the silence he left behind. Not grief, not scandal, just silence. And sometimes silence is the most honest obituary there is. Instead of attending, I went to the beach that morning, the same spot I used to sneak away to during high school, the one place where I could hear myself think without interruption. I stood barefoot on the wet sand, the wind tugging at my sleeves, and thought about what legacy actually meant now that the man who built the Cruise brand was gone. For so long, I'd been reacting to it, rejecting it, confronting it, reshaping it. But now I was free to redefine it altogether. Weeks later, Tate called. I didn't expect you to show, he said, referring to the private family memorial being held at the estate. You're right, I said, but I'd like to meet you. Not there. We agreed on a neutral space, a quiet rooftop cafe overlooking Biscayne Bay. When he arrived, he looked tired. Not aged, just worn in a way grief tends to mark you. I don't know what to do with all this, he said, stirring his coffee without drinking it. The money, the properties, the expectation to continue it all. You don't have to do anything you don't believe in, I said. You're allowed to let it go, but the board expects me to step in, to become Simon 2.0. And do you want that? He looked at me. I used to think I did. But now, after seeing what you built, I wonder if I ever wanted it for the right reasons. I took a slow sip of my espresso and let the words settle between us. Tate, I said finally, legacy is a mirror. You either spend your life trying to look like the man in it, or you smash it and build something real with the shards. He nodded. And for the first time in years, I saw not the brother who had betrayed me, but the boy who had once shielded me from getting grounded after I'd snuck out past curfew. A boy lost in a name he didn't choose. The Glasshouse Fellowship expanded that summer. We took in 60 new students, doubling our intake, expanding into social entrepreneurship, creative coding, and environmental design. Malik, the fellow who once slept in his car, now led our junior mentorship team. He'd just been accepted into an Ivy League program and returned every weekend to mentor the next wave. One Friday afternoon, he knocked gently on my office door. I need to ask you something personal, he said. Go ahead. How did you stop being angry? I paused. I didn't, I said. I just stopped carrying it. He looked confused. Anger's like fire, I explained. You can either let it burn you from the inside or you can use it to light your way forward. He nodded slowly. I think I'm starting to get it. You're allowed to feel it, Malik. Just don't let it decide who you become. Beatrice sent me a letter in late autumn. It was typed formal, almost sterile, but the last line caught me off guard. I may never understand the choices you made, Elias, but I acknowledge that you made them with more courage than we ever had. No apology, no request, just acknowledgement. It was enough. I didn't reply. Not out of coldness, but because some doors don't need to be reopened. They just need to stay closed. Softly. Theo and I celebrated our 10th anniversary in New York that winter. A quiet dinner in the West Village. No press, no guests. Just us, a bottle of wine, and a promise renewed not in words, but in presence. We talked about what was next, about expanding Glasshouse to other cities, about adopting, about building something neither of us had growing up, stability. As we walked down the snow-dusted streets, he said, "Do you ever think you'd have made it without them pushing you out?" I think I would have made something, I said. But not this. He nodded. Pain has a way of shaping the strongest structures, and sometimes, I added, what breaks us clears the way. 6 months after Simon's death, the crew's estate board extended an invitation they wanted to name the new community wing after me. I declined. Instead, I offered to fund a new building entirely under the Glasshouse name, with full ownership and no affiliation to the crew's family. They tried to negotiate, to honor the family name. But I held firm. We don't need to honor what never honored us, I said. We build forward, not backward. The check cleared 2 weeks later. The groundbreaking was scheduled for early spring. And on opening day, dozens of students lined up with their families, some of them stepping into a mentorship program for the first time in their lives. There were no marble busts, no plaques. Just a sign above the entry that read, "Welcome home." Sometimes I still get messages from strangers, people who watched the viral videos, who read the profile pieces, who heard the story secondhand. They ask if it was all worth it. The pain, the exile, the rebuilding. And I never answer with a simple yes or no, because the truth is it wasn't about worth. It was about necessity. Some lives are born in comfort, others are forged in the furnace. And mine was carved from the silence of being left behind, and the roar of deciding never to stay there. Now, when I speak to young people, whether in auditoriums or one-on-one across a conference table, I always tell them the same thing. You are not where you came from. You are what you do next. The last time I saw the Cruz estate, it was through the tinted windows of a town car on the way to a glasshouse summit. It looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally, like a stage set that had once felt like the whole world, but was now just a prop in a life I no longer belonged to. And I didn't feel anger or sadness. I just felt free. Some wounds never close the way we expect. They become part of us not as open gashes, but as quiet seams holding together the shape of who we've become. Pain, when faced with honesty and endurance, can be transformed into strength, not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that refuses to break when everything else crumbles. There are moments in life when we are abandoned not just by people, but by the belief that we ever belonged. And yet in that solitude, something extraordinary can happen. Clarity. The kind that forces you to ask not, why did this happen to me, but what will I build because of it? Legacy isn't something inherited. It's something created, choice by choice, brick by brick, truth by uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't retaliation, it's reinvention. And so if you've ever felt discarded, invisible, or silenced, know this: your story isn't over. It's just waiting for you to reclaim the pen. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Until next time, stay strong, stay grounded, and keep writing your truth.